One of the best things a counselor ever told me ever was you can't make other people happy, nor is it your job to make other people happy.
Correct.
They have to be happy, which ultimately means, Josh, it's no one else's job to make you happy. They can't make you happy. I mean, it's your choice to be happy.
The best thing my counselor ever told me was, you are working really hard to make others change, and that's not a thing. So the only person you can change is yourself.
That's right.
And your expectations. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks. Yep. Got it.
Yeah. One of the best marriage tips I've been given, and so I give out a lot right now, is be in the position to give the best version of yourself to your spouse. Because if you give the best version of yourself to your spouse and they start working themselves and they give the best version of themselves to you, then most likely it'll work out. Yeah. And so, the way I would kind of approach this in your mindset is, if you went back to the first date, like the first real date, like not when you met them in the bar, but like you actually went out on a date with somebody. If you go back to the first date with your spouse or your significant other right now, and think about what behavior you're on. Like, you probably opened the door, you probably pulled out the chair, you probably dressed up, a little extra effort into what you wore, how you looked.
Yeah.
You were probably super kind in all your words, which I'm guilty of sometimes, right? I can be bad about that sometimes. And, you think about what you would never do on a first date, why would you do that later? Yeah. It's like you present the best version of yourself early on. Why wouldn't you keep doing that? And so I think it's a really good mental picture that I have to live in. I don't know if you have any other little tips from that.
So, I think that's perfect. The other side of the coin that I think is important to remember is being the best version of yourself for where you're at in your relationship, or right, meeting your spouse where they need you. I have seen so often, with friends, just among our group and just in our sphere or whatever, when things start to go bad, mm-hmm, people bail. Yep. And I think that, yeah, it's sad. And it's not for wrong reasons. Like, let me be clear about that. Like, spouses start to do really shitty things, and the divorce is valid. It's valid. Like, in every form you can define it as, it's valid.
Sometimes.
But it doesn't mean it's right, Yep.
So
I think recognizing when your spouse is down and like when they're really struggling with something, and trying to meet them there and bring them up, mm-hmm, rather than be so angry at what they've caused for you or your kids or your family, or it's not what you signed up for. I'm using air quotes. I think that's a way to elevate as well. Like, you need to, and I'm not by any means saying stay in a horrible relationship, like, not at all. But what I'm saying is, I think part of our jobs as partners and spouses is to be there for them, yep, and try to pick them up when they're not being themselves, and trying to figure out what that reason is, because you know who you married. So what has changed, right? Mm-hmm. Meet them there. And I think we're quick to get, especially with our spouses, it's the blame game, or we take it super personal. Their behavior is personal.
Right.
And it's not looking at, well, what's going on? What changed? Like, what is causing this behavior out of, mm-hmm, you? So I think it's important. And I feel like you have something to say, because you're like pondering.
Well, I love what you had to say. And in general, I think that I would agree with you in general. I think that there's very, 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 very few real reasons for divorce. So starting there with a different mindset, like, and you said, hey, there's lots of reasons to get divorced. I think there's very, very few.
I think there's very few too.
Right.
There's lots of reasons given.
For sure. Okay.
Lots
so
of reasons
that's
given.
Where I was biting my tongue.
There's lots of reasons given.
Yeah.
I think people are really quick to
here's
pull
the thing. It's okay. So how long did it take to slide to get to the point where you made a bad choice, or they made a bad choice, or what was always happening for the months or years that you did nothing, mm-hmm, and they did nothing to get to the point where you would actually say that horrible shit to your spouse, right?
Right.
And so where was the effort then? Because you're focused on this moment when you look at the 2 years or 3 years or 5 years of bad thoughts, bad behaviors, and no effort. And that goes back to where you start with everything good requires effort.
It does.
Everything good requires effort.
If you're in a relationship and things all of a sudden are terrible,
It wasn't all of a sudden terrible.
It wasn't all of a sudden terrible, and that wasn't how it started. So
Right.
like trying to remember that you hand selected this human
Yep.
to live your life with.
Yep.
There was something that made you hand select
And maybe
them.
if you're dating right now, like listen to our words, like take longer hand selecting if you're unsure.
Hand selected. My favorite thing is like when Randy's being really weird or like doing something, I'm like,
I chose you.
Hand selected, ladies and gentlemen. Like this was super intentional.
That's pretty funny, actually. I need to do that more often. I'm sure Christy does that all the time with me.